What a little competition will do to a company that's gotten complacent. Many of you may know about the updates that Blizzard have released about upcoming content additions and elements to Overwatch 2 that they hope will bring people back to the game. Marvel Rivals has been heavily encroaching on that player base. I mean, when you look at player numbers on Steam, we got a game that's still peaking in the 300,000s in the 24-hour peak mark on Steam. And then when it comes to Overwatch 2, it's like a tenth of that. Do keep in mind that a lot of people do play on Blizzard's platform, battle.net. So this isn't a complete picture of that player base. But this is not insubstantial right here, what Marvel Rivals is doing. And even if you look at Twitch numbers, you'll see that Marvel Rivals has 3 times the viewership of Overwatch 2, 33.6 thousand viewers versus 10.8 thousand viewers. Now, we are seeing a bit of an uptick when it comes to Overwatch's player base. We're seeing players kind of slowly return, and that's because of major updates that Blizzard have provided. They streamed this event called Overwatch 2 Spotlight, which is basically like a Nintendo Direct specifically dedicated to Overwatch 2. And they introduced a bunch of new modes and features and elements that are actually good. This very much feels like a response to Marvel Rivals. I'm not saying that they haven't been working on this stuff, because they can't just magically make this stuff happen without having worked on it for months, maybe even years. But this Spotlight event very much feels like Blizzard and Overwatch going, oh shit, like we gotta like kick things up a notch and get this information out and kickstart as much as possible as soon as possible before Overwatch 2 is kind of driven into the shadows while Marvel Rivals takes the spotlight. Now, one of the funniest things is the way they make it a big deal that loot boxes are coming back. And I mean, this just highlights how bad the monetization system and the progression system of Overwatch 2 was. The fact that people were actually desperate to see loot boxes return. Now, one thing to note about the loot boxes in Overwatch 2 is that you cannot purchase them. They are all earned via gameplay. So that's a good thing. That means that these loot boxes are not real-world gambling because real money cannot be exchanged for them. So that's one area where these loot boxes are actually an improvement from Overwatch 1. Behind Overwatch 1, you could just kind of play the game, level up, and earn loot boxes and never really have to pay a cent to earn a lot of rewards. With Overwatch 2, that option was removed, and people felt like unless you paid to play the game, and yes, it's free to play, but if it's... And so the return of loot boxes and the fact that you can only earn them via gameplay has won a lot of points, and this is one of the most liked announcements. Blizzard have put up a lot of content on social media, and this one right here, 6.8 million views, 40,000 likes. Here's the segment from the Overwatch 2 Spotlight stream discussing the return of loot boxes.
Season 15 is the return of loot boxes. You heard that right. Loot boxes are making a comeback. We're keeping it fun while being transparent about what's inside and the rate of various drops from opening each box. Oh, and guess what? They'll be available in the free track of the Battle Pass. And of course, they'll also be in the weekly rewards where you can get loot boxes for just playing. There are plenty of ways to earn them.
Now, I'm curious if you can earn loot boxes by just leveling up, which is how it worked in Overwatch 1 and allowed for like a constant stream of loot boxes. I just hope that the rate at which you earn loot boxes in Overwatch 2 is relatively comparable to the rate at which you earn them in the first game. There was some misunderstanding at first. People thought that these would be purchasable, but Blizzard has since clarified to news outlets like IGN that loot boxes will not be paid for and only available through free means such as the free track of the Battle Pass and weekly rewards. And then beyond that, there's more transparency with these loot boxes, as you can see the odds of a loot box and what you're likely to get from it before opening it. The Verge also highlighted how players will be guaranteed a legendary cosmetic in at least one of every 20 loot boxes, and there's a duplicate protection system that works to avoid giving you things you already own. Right here we have a screenshot from the Overwatch 2 Spotlight stream where you can see how a legendary is guaranteed after 20 boxes opened, and right here there's 1 out of 20. There's duplicate protection. So yeah, this is something that's being celebrated. Many argue that loot boxes should have never been removed in the first place because Overwatch 2's monetization system was just so much worse and so much less rewarding. And the fact that they're back now with the monetization attached to loot boxes removed just makes it better. And then beyond that, there are folks who are talking about how they've seen clips from streams where developers have said that all shop skins from previous seasons will be in the pool. So that means that the FOMO element has also been removed from loot boxes. This is why competition is so important. It kicks the asses of complacent companies, and they actually start paying attention to customers' wants and needs and desires and start respecting the community, because, you know, a lot of the community within Overwatch were starting to drift towards Marvel Rivals because it felt more like what they loved about Overwatch back in the golden days of this series. Marvel Rivals in many ways felt like Overwatch 1, but, you know, it has its own unique elements and it's got heroes from the Marvel IP. And so, you know, this is Blizzard's response, essentially. And so much of that response involves going back to what they did before. And so right here, you can see that something else that was announced in the Overwatch 2 Spotlight stream is the return of competitive 6v6, the return of Overwatch Classic, among other things. They're hosting stuff like this as events to test out the viability of going back to these formats in Overwatch 2. And then beyond that, they've introduced some cool new gameplay twists, like the perks that they're adding to the game.
When you level up Orisa to level 2, your minor perk choice will be between heat reduction on your primary fire or the ability to briefly tank burst damage with Fortify. The fun really gets going when you get to your major perk at level 3, though. Here, Orisa gets the choice between a higher impact energy javelin or swapping out her javelin spin for a protective barrier.
So yeah, that's just one example of minor and major perks. Now heroes level up throughout a match, and as they level up, they can pick between minor and major perks that kind of add a twist in their gameplay style and how they play and the roles that they serve within matches. So yeah, right here we have another clip that kind of briefly highlights this new feature.
How could you not win with such an advantage?
So yeah, I mean, it is going to change up the game quite a bit. And it's going to give heroes more flexibility. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool stuff. And then in Season 16, Overwatch is bringing a whole new mode called Stadium, which is really interesting. It feels like what they were trying to introduce with the PvE mode, where heroes level up and then they have skill trees, essentially. They're called mods and traits in this mode. It's essentially a 5v5 mode that takes place across 7 rounds, and throughout the rounds, you're able to modify your heroes. And we get glimpses of what that modification screen looks like in the Overwatch 2 Spotlight stream itself. It looks something like this, where you can spend currency to give your heroes new abilities and survival elements that enhance their ability to just stay longer in the battlefield. Their weapons can be enhanced, and then traits change up how they play entirely, or they, you know, significantly change aspects of their arsenal. And so essentially you have these character builds that you can make for each respective hero. So here's some footage of what that looks like, the Stadium mode.
Dynamically interacting with your actions.
Beyond that, Stadium in particular features the ability to toggle between first-person and third-person mode.
You may remember us teasing some of these in events.
So
like
these are
Sanctuary
more
or
traits. This one is the Reinhardt kit.
So
right here we have the third-person gameplay.
Movement penalty while it's raised and allowing him to activate
not just in shield mode, but also in hammer mode.
Become a utility healer for your team while improving your.
We have Soldier in third-person mode.
Attaching it to yourself.
I believe this is exclusive to Stadium mode currently.
Stand in its radius. Or as Kiriko, embrace your true nature as a dive DPS by improving your health and damage resistance while gaining the ability to teleport to allies and enemies.
This in part also feels like a response to Marvel Rivals, which is a third-person hero shooter game. This feels like them trying to take a piece of that pie. And then beyond that, you've got new content like upcoming new heroes such as Freya. And then there's this individual, Hero 44. His name is Aqua. They're introducing a bunch of new cosmetics, which is something that Marvel Rivals has absolutely nailed. And Blizzard needs to catch up on. So yeah, there's a lot going on here, a lot of it good, but I wonder how much of this would have happened like this had it not been for Marvel Rivals and the competition that they introduced, how complacent Overwatch would have gotten as a game if it wasn't for Marvel Rivals kind of kicking their butts a little bit and making them realize that they need to do more than what they're currently doing if they intend to retain their current player base and not lose them to a competing game that in many ways does just certain things better. And so this is why competition is so good, is so important, and why it should continuously be encouraged, and why new games of a genre being introduced that kind of surpass what exists, and how that keeps raising the bars for, you know, all the companies competing in that arena. That ultimately is a win for us, the consumers, as we get to, you know, see improvements like these come along when they actually have some stakes involved, in the sense of like they no longer are a monopoly in the genre. Even if Overwatch is the originator of the genre, it doesn't mean others can't take inspiration and do something better. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything you need to know about this Overwatch 2 update and the return of loot boxes, which they somehow seem to be doing right in this scenario, and which people missed because, you know, progression and monetization in Overwatch 2 was just that piss poor. It tells you a lot about, you know, what this game was prior to the introduction of all these new things. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on all of these new updates for Overwatch 2. Is that going to be enough to bring you back into that game? Are you sticking with Marvel Rivals? What do you think the future holds for Overwatch 2 now that we're seeing Blizzard kind of step things up a notch? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.